Good evening and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hesham Tillawi. Welcome to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we will be discussing a training mission, a simulation that the United States Joint Forces Command, known as USJECOM, actually JFCOM, they are conducting a drill, a training in Portland, Oregon, simulating a nuclear attack on that city. It's a program that the United States Army, military, the Homeland Security, the FBI, many federal departments and state departments are taking part in this exercise. And it is a simulation of a nuclear attack on Portland, Oregon. Now, the program is being conducted or built by a company called, or a firm called Nobel Rsolve. It's a program that the United States Army is saying to train the people and the state agencies and the federal agencies to handle a catastrophic event such as a hurricane, such as nuclear attack, terrorist attack, etc., etc., and is being conducted as we speak in Portland, Oregon. Some people don't like this. Some people think there might be something else behind this particular exercise. Some people think that when we have this type of exercises, normally something takes place, something factual, something, for instance, the day before 9/11, FEMA and other state and federal agencies were conducting a drill simulating airplanes hitting high-rise buildings in New York. And we know what happened on 9/11. So this exercise is taking place right now. It started August 20th and it will last through the 24th in Portland, Oregon. Like I said, simulating a nuclear attack on that city. And just some of the departments that are involved in this: the Department of Homeland Security, Energy, FBI, FEMA, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, the Commonwealth of Virginia, the State of Oregon, the Port of Virginia, and United States Northern Command, European Command, Strategic Command, Pacific Command, United States Transportation Command, the Army, Navy, and Coast Guard, the National Guard, the Virginia National Guard, the Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University, and the Virginia Modeling and Simulation Center, and many others, and multinational participants, even people, some soldiers from Israel is taking part in this exercise. Now, this have some people concerned that this is a start of something that we all not going to like, and we will be speaking shortly with Captain Eric May, military correspondent with the Lone Star Iconoclast. Captain May is a former Army military intelligence and public affairs officer, as well as a former NBC editorial writer. His political and military analyses have appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the Houston Chronicle, and the Military Intelligence magazine. And Captain May has been on the show before. He was the one to basically tell us what happened on the battle for Baghdad, where he thought that the United States Army was in trouble at one time and has used the neutron bomb, and that's basically what caused the fall of Baghdad and the end of the Saddam regime. Captain May, welcome to the program.
Dr. Tillawi, it's delightful to be there with you. How are you doing?
Doing fine, thank you. Captain May, what is going on in Portland, Oregon at this time, as we speak?
Well, as you noted, the August 20 through 24th this week, Monday through Friday, they're conducting the second half of the Nobel Rsolve exercise. Now, beyond that, it's difficult to be specific, largely because military and official sources have purposely been vague and evasive on answering what's going on. Published reports from the spring of this year indicated that Nobel Rsolve 02, which means the Oregon component of a Nobel Rsolve going on now, was going to entail a terrorist nuke striking in Portland, the city of Portland on the west coast. We have that information was carried nationwide by mainstream media newsletters affiliated with government information, and in fact, there was a Harvard/Stanford study conducted by former Defense Secretary William Perry called the day after, 24 hours after a nuclear attack in an American city, which actually was published April 19th, 2007, that contained 3 maps of terror nukes, 2 of them being very vague general maps of Washington, D.C., which is a quite expectable target, if one is to play the scenario out. The third of which was a much more detailed map of Portland, Oregon, specifically the Burlington Northern Railroad Bridge in the port area of Portland. So we had every reason to believe that the exercise entailed a 10-kiloton nuclear weapons attack. The military, along with Congressman DeFazio, an Oregon congressman, along with the mayor of Portland, all gave us differing stories on what was actually occurring. And 1 week ago, the military, in an interview with public radio station KBLO in Portland, indicated that it had changed the scenario from a nuke to a volcanic eruption. The next day, the Oregonian, the paper of record for Portland, published an editorial saying that the scenario was a nuke and that they were all in favor of it. And all the time this is going on, I just received communications from Joint Forces Command to their public affairs office, Colonel Philip Smith, in which he said that the idea that there was a nuke was erroneous and that had never been the case. So we have at least three different accounts of an exercise ongoing now. Now, as we speak, my sources, fellow journalists with the Lone Star Iconoclast, have been to the state headquarters of the ongoing exercises in Salem, Oregon, and they say that they're dealing with an earthquake scenario, all of which is fine. But as this is occurring, we're getting words that the Oregon National Guard is practicing martial law in Portland scenarios, and we know that Portland indie media, which is one of the major ways that non-mainstream media journalism gets around, Portland indie media has crashed, which has never happened in memory, and it's crashed in the middle of this exercise. So, needless to say, there are many dubious things, and it's only proper and accurate to say we don't quite know what's happening, but we have every reason to suspect the worst, which is that there was, or maybe still is, a nuclear attack in the exercise scenario targeting Portland, Oregon, and that everybody official has either lied or evaded to avoid addressing the issues of a targeting of Portland in the exercise scenario.
Okay. Now, why are you particularly worried about this exercise scenario, even if it's nuclear? You think because of what happened on 9/11 and there was a drill by FEMA and other federal agencies simulating an attack on high-rise buildings in New York the day before 9/11, are you and people who are thinking something wrong is happening, are you concerned that something will actually take place?
Sure, and let's make it clear, because the minute I say that, people say, what, you're accusing the government of being against us? And my answer to that is that's Jeffersonian democracy. Doubting your government is the most American and patriotic thing you can do. Suspecting your government, having deep cynicism towards your government. I mean, my God, we're taught that every government on earth is a corrupt, evil entity exploiting the people, except for our own. Everybody thinks that their own government is the only government on earth incapable of doing what's called false flag terror, meaning carrying out an attack on its own people and blaming someone else. But given that, as you say, on and before 9/11, there were military exercises going on simulating exactly the scenario that occurred on 9/11, and on 7/7, the London attack, 7/7/2005, July 7th, the exact subways and the exact times that were attacked on 7/7 in London were the exact targets and times that were being practiced by a 1,000-man strong London terror exercise. The odds against this being coincidental are astronomical. I mean, it's astronomical.
Okay.
It's crazy. For governments in the U.S. and U.K. to have the people believe that these were mere coincidence, it's tantamount to someone who has shot someone on the street saying, "Well, I just happened to have a gun in my pocket, just happened to see somebody I didn't like on the street, and the gun just happened to discharge and kill them." But it's all a coincidence, and anybody who says otherwise is a conspiracy theorist. I mean, that would never work in the case of a murder on the street, but in the case of mass murder in the 9/11 U.S. or 7/7 U.K. attacks, that's exactly what's being asserted. We were practicing those exact scenarios, the governments tell us, but that has nothing to do with the fact that exactly what we were practicing is what happened. So, extrapolating from that, any time the government tells us it's conducting a drill that involves killing mass numbers of us, but they're conducting that drill for our own good and protection, we would be, people say we're treasonous. We would be treasonous not to doubt the government.
Okay. Now, you had some communications with the government, in particular Philip Smith, the Lieutenant Colonel, United States Director of Public Affairs, United States Joint Forces Command, and he basically said that there's no nuke, real or simulated. But you're saying that it originally it was to simulate a nuke attack on Portland, and they changed it?
Yes. Here I refer the listeners. We've instituted a communications network across Portland through the Yahoo group system, which is called Portland Nuclear Inquest. I say it again, Portland Nuclear Inquest. And anybody who's interested in following this scenario with us, or who is interested in accessing my 5 articles in the last 5 weeks on the exercise going on in Portland called Nobel Rsolve, can get to it through Portland Nuclear Inquest. In any search engine, it'll pop up. In April of 2007, April 4th specifically, the FCW.com, FederalCommunicationsWeekly.com, put out an article which specifically stated that Nobel Rsolve, the Portland component, coming up in August of this year, meaning now, would involve a simulated nuclear attack on Portland. 2 weeks later, a think tank comprised of former Secretary of Defense William Perry, along with top academics and government operatives from Harvard and Stanford, published a nuclear catastrophe scenario which carried detailed maps, a detailed map, one of 3 figures in the article, involving a 10-kiloton strike on the Portland Harbor area. So, clearly in April of 2007, lots of people were thinking that the Portland nuclear scenario was a possibility, meaning that, so-called terrorists might carry it out, and B, that the U.S. government was conducting exercises supposedly aimed at practicing this scenario. Now, that story stood unchallenged on the Internet through a major military-friendly site, fcw.com, for 4 months. Until eventually I got word that people in Portland were concerned about it. You know, the Internet's a wonderful tool of communication. And I called up the offices of Representative Peter DeFazio, Democrat, 4th District in Oregon. He's a congressman in the U.S. House of Representatives. I called up Joint Forces Command, Lieutenant Colonel Philip Smith, Deputy Director of Public Affairs. And I called up the city of Portland, their communications people, Mr. John Dussard. And basically, 2 of the 3 entities said, the Congressman DeFazio said they didn't know anything about it, but they were lying because I'd already picked up Internet communications with his office that indicated his constituents are concerned. Lieutenant Colonel Smith and I talked probably 3 weeks ago about the exercise as a nuclear exercise. Then a week later, he sent me an email saying, no, it's not a nuclear exercise, it never was, and we never talked about it. And the city of Portland said, you know, we don't know and we're not interested. Please leave us out of this.
Now,
here you have 3 different echelons of political and military officials that responsible for or involved in this exercise who are giving us 3 contradictory statements.
Okay. Captain May, I mean, some people are saying that we are a divided nation, and the only way we are going to be united is if, in fact, there is a catastrophic event, not economic, not environmental, but actually blame it on the terrorists. That's the only way we are going to be reunited again. Is that, do you see it that way? Is that what maybe somebody is thinking of doing?
Oh, well, that's utterly true. Right now, the United States, the American people, are waking up to the fact that mass murder and treason were committed against us September 11, 2001. And the only way to make the American people become an enraged, stupid beast again would be to repeat the false flag terror. You know, my last article, which is called 911-2B, American Nightmare and Neocon Fantasy, I start with that. Recently, a Philadelphia Daily News journalist, Zionist Stu Bukowski, wrote an article titled, quote, "To save America, we need another 9/11," unquote. And he's only been the most recent in a long string of people who have said that. The Republican chairman for the state of Arkansas said that. I think Senator Rick Santorum said something to the effect of big things may happen before the elections that will help the American people get refocused. There's no doubt that I agree utterly with the statement. If you want to drive a country into a mindless war to commit genocide against Arabs in the Middle East, you're going to have to do something and blame it on the Arabs in the Middle East.
Okay.
So what I'm talking about now with Nobel Rsolve is in large part based on the fact that the neocon, the Bush administration, and friends of the Bush administration, statement saying that we need to be attacked, you know, for the greater good of public unity and the war on terror, have coincided with intelligence and executive branch predictions that we will be attacked. All this seems rather self-serving. It's rather like, Dr. Tillawi, as if I were saying to my friend, let's say I were with a young friend, and I said, close your eyes. If you get hit, it's going to be because Muhammad hit you. And if you get hit, I want you to go fight Muhammad or Ali or whatever Middle Eastern name. And I say, now close your eyes. And then I hit my friend. And I say, you see, Ali or Muhammad just hit you. It's a surefire way to get somebody to start a fight.
Okay.
It requires the credulity of the public, the deception of a mass media, which is not working for the public interest, but rather for the corporate interests and Zionist interests that own and control them. And it requires a desire, already stated in multiple documents, the most prominent of which I suppose being Project for a New American Century, Restructuring America's Defense document.
Okay. Let me ask you.
Conquest of the Middle East.
Okay. Now, it has been since the 20th, what was that, yesterday, I mean, this is the second day. Have you heard anything about the progress, or if any protest is going on in Portland, or anything? I mean, have you heard anything?
Well, we have various people. As I said, I've instituted a user group called the Portland Nuclear Inquest. People are in communication with us who are taking photos, taking photos of various military activities. For instance, there's an unusual naval vessel, or it may be a commercial vessel, out in the area of the Burlington Northern Bridge and the port of Portland, which is ground zero according to the Harvard-Stanford study published in the spring. And we've got people out there taking pictures of that, putting them up on the internet. Concurrently, there's an aggregation, a coalition of state government and military organizations headquartered up in Salem. These indicate the elements that could be used. I'm not saying they are. I'm saying they could be used to carry out a false flag attack against the people of Portland. The Indie Media site in Portland has crashed. That's 18 hours ago. So another way of putting that is that Indie Media, an independent media resource center through which the public can post information to one another, has crashed for the first time in the memory of anyone in Portland within 24 hours of the initiation of an exercise that may involve a nuclear simulation about official secrecy and misinformation. So right now, according to official sources, the Oregon area is simulation involving nothing more than natural disasters. And that's the report they have given our journalists on scene. As you mentioned, I write for the Lone Star Iconoclast. We have a former Marine Major, Major William Fox, who is on scene in Salem, headquarters of the Oregon component of the Nobel Rsolve exercise. And according to him and all sources on site, they are conducting earthquake drills at present, reacting to a natural catastrophe that would be an earthquake.
Okay.
But all these other things are most suspicious.
Okay, Captain, you are a former military intelligence officer. How do you read, or what do you read into having Israelis actually being trained or participating in this particular exercise in Portland? Why, if this is to protect the homeland, why do we have Israeli soldiers on the scene participating in this? If you would like to comment on that.
Okay. First, I have not seen that document, the documentation of that. I would be interested in seeing it. I do not doubt it for a minute. I know that there are other forces involved. But the Israeli presence...
this is, by the way, before you answer, this came off of the USJFCOM, the United States Joint Force Command, and off of their website. So they have this on there. Well, when you answer that, I want you to answer something else too with that's probably related. Martial law, are we... I mean, I want you to answer the Israeli thing to see from your experience as an intelligence officer, why would we be these Israelis be participating in this particular exercise if it is for homeland? And also, do you see this as an exercise in instituting martial law in the United States?
Okay. First question about the Israel presence, and as you say that the Joint Forces Command document, I'll be sure to look it up. That's of extreme interest to me. I don't like it a bit. Candidly, everyone needs to understand who's listening to me. I'm as red, white, and blue an American soldier as anybody who's ever worn the uniform, and I was taught never to trust anybody's forces but our own. Now, at present, I don't even trust our own because they're operating under the guidance of a White House that has already committed treason to the 9/11 attack. The idea that Israel is being invited over here doesn't shock me. I mean, look, the tactics we were using at Abu Ghraib were in large part derived from similar tactics the Israelis were using on the Palestinians. The Project for a New American Century document, Restructuring America's Defenses, was in large part based upon the Israeli document securing the realm that came a couple of years earlier. Right now we have Israeli police and commando forces both over here and in Israel training American forces. I mean, this is politically incorrect, and it might sound like a rude thing to say given the way Americans have been programmed, but the simple fact of the matter is, right now the global war on terror is basically, at least on one level, Christians killing Muslims for the benefit of Jews. And, there were Mossad agents, or at least 4 or 5 very dubious people present during the 9/11 attacks themselves in nearby New Jersey, set up and filming and celebrating the event. Of course, you've heard about that. Fox News, Carl Cameron, in September of 2001, actually, Fox News, for God's sake, actually ran a 4-part series about the extensive Israeli intelligence infiltration of United States police, military, and intelligence operations. So, that this is not being talked about widely just shows the extent of the influence of what doctors Mearsheimer and Walt have called the Israel lobby, or what you could call the Jewish lobby, or what you could call Zionism, which controls the media and has great inroads to controlling the government in the United States. So the fact that there are Israeli forces present is a source of great anxiety to me, because were I an Israeli soldier, if I were a Jew, and I were in the Israeli military, I would be quite willing, and I suppose most patriotic members of another country would, to do just about anything to get the world's most powerful military force involved in a regional conflict in which it was killing my enemies for me. I don't think these people should be over here participating with us. That's the long and the short of it. Now, as to the question of whether Nobel Resolve Israel is not being used as a pretext to enact martial law, my answer is maybe. The first thing to understand is that, in my view, every exercise which is carried out simulating a terrorist strike on the United States is an opportunity for the White House, for the Bush neocon regime, to carry out the exercise scenario, as they did on September 11th, 2001, as they did on July 7th, 2005 in London. So the fact that an exercise is going on involving a terrorist simulation, and we have every reason to believe that Nobel Resolve was intended to do that, and may still be doing that, means that the government has an opportunity to do that. Everyone's in place for the event.
Okay.
The particular document that makes it worth considering that martial law may be in the works is called National Security Presidential Directive 51, or NSPD 51. It's a veritable dictatorship law which gives the Bush administration the power to control all governments, national, state, and local, along with key industries, meaning things like media, in the event of another catastrophe, whether it be a natural catastrophe like Katrina or a terror attack like another 9/11. So the idea that the Bush administration might use something like Nobel Resolve to stage the terror event that the Bush administration has been predicting and talking about all spring and summer, to enact extraordinary federal powers that it's just granted itself. NSPD 51 was just signed into law by Bush on May 9th, 2007. These aren't really radical ideas. These are simply if I were still acting as a intelligence officer in an army exercise, and we had an enemy commander who had 30% political ratings, his chief cabinet officials were coming under threats of indictment and impeachment, who had committed mass treason against his people, or at least who had about one half of this country thinking he may have, the idea that he might use military forces to stage some kind of event that would be a distraction away from all these accusations and problems and would empower him with dictatorship, I would be fired from my position as a military intelligence officer if I did not entertain and develop that thought. It would be the height of incompetence for me not to entertain that thought.
Okay. Captain, stay with me. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back.
You said full of baloney.
Okay, I'm full. Okay, I like baloney.
Just shut up a minute and listen.
Okay, listen.
Going radical?
Well, I think it's really dangerous and really wrong for anybody to say another. And I think the danger is to say it's Christians doing it. It's a particular branch of
Christianity is they have numbers.
They do.
They used to be a minority.
Final battle is going to occur because that will usher in, prior to that, the rapture and the end of the world and this paradise on earth of the millennium in which the elect will rule.
The brain of George Bush.
Karl Rove.
Yes, Karl Rove. Singing
Onward Christian Soldiers.
That is not told in the Bible. So we can't we very much deny in the Palestinians their history. The only reference we have is the Bible.
The Bible, even the Hebrew scriptures, were not written to be history books. They were meant to be a revelation of how God dealt with the people.
But the world is taking the history of Israel to be the history that we have in the Bible. It is not taken in consideration that, hey, there is a Palestinian history out there that we need to go and look
basically saying, hey, get the hell out of America if you don't support the Jews, you know, blah, 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 blah.
And the nerve of you to get on TV and you're born in Jordan.
Okay.
The nerve of you.
Okay.
You have the nerve to get on open channel.
Okay, listen. Oh, yeah, but you know what? I have this push button thing.
You know why? Because
we went in there for the right reason.
What is it? What are those reasons?
Regime change.
The bomb where? How?
Anything that can set it off.
Hey, how far would this little 1-watt motor throw a bomb? Come on, Chris. But hey.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are speaking with Captain Eric May, military correspondent with the Lone Star Iconoclast, and he is a former military intelligence and public affairs officer, as well as a writer, a journalist. His articles appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the Houston Chronicle, and Military Intelligence Magazine, and he also was a NBC editorial writer. Captain May, we have a lot of people waiting on the phone, so we are going to go to line 1 with Freedom. Good, Freedom?
Yes, I would like to ask the captain a serious question here. It seems that over the past few days, the Wall Street Journal, the former CIA man, Michael Shaw, they seem to be coming out and blaming George Tenet now for the 9/11 attacks, for apparently getting the intelligence wrong and not letting the Bush administration know that bin Laden might strike in the USA. Why is that happening at this present point in time when the right-wing talk show hosts like Michael Savage seem to be instilling a lot of fear in the American people that another Muslim attack is near? So could you please explain why now they're trying to pawn everything off on former CIA Director George Tenet, Captain? And thanks very much.
Thanks.
Dr. Tillawi, may I answer?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, that was a very informed question, and thanks. The first point is that it's a kind of tit-for-tat issue. The White House is trying to put it off on George Tenet, it being 9/11, responsibility for 9/11, largely because in the spring, George Tenet tried to put it off on the White House. You remember that he came out with a book detailing his tenure as CIA director. Now, candidly, I think George Tenet and the White House were collaborators in high treason. I think that both sides were involved in the 9/11 issue, and that right now this is a puppet show. The White House blames Tenet, but they can't really say what happened, and Tenet blames the White House, but he can't really say what happened. The fact of the matter is they were all working together. It's a smoke screen, as we say. As to the particular, I think your caller mentioned Michael Schur, which is a great guy to mention. He was in charge of the so-called bin Laden unit in the CIA before 9/11. Michael Schur is a hack. He's one of the people involved in this puppet show of creating the mythical Al-Qaeda group, which we in my circles call Al-CIA-Dub. Michael Schur has actually been prognosticating that another Muslim attack is pending. Always a Muslim attack. Always the exact people we need to kill so we can take their oil. Those happen to be the exact people we expect an attack from, according to CIA operatives like Michael Schur. And he's roused my ire particularly because he's predicting that the most likely target is Houston. What irks me about that is that he must have been reading my work, because I said exactly the same thing. I've been working on Houston as the primary target for the last 3 years. So,
why is that? Why you think Houston is?
Well, not to get into a separate topic, but what we are now doing in Portland, where we have discovered an exercise that has the potential to cause the destruction of Portland via a WMD mass casualty event, which is exactly what they're predicting, right? That exercise has been pending in Houston for 3 years. They have continually... Houston is the center of world petrochemical interests. And after all, this has been a war for oil and Israel. Those are the only two geostrategic objectives of this war. Oil and Israel.
Now, which one you give it more weight? Captain, which one do you give more weight to, the Israel issue or the oil issue?
You know, that's such a good question, Dr. Tillawi, and we could talk about it for a whole different interview. I don't know. I used to say oil and Israel, then I said Israel and oil, so forgive me, I usually give very direct answers, but this one time I'll beg your indulgence while I say they are co-equal motives.
I think you're not the only one out there who is probably, I myself, which I lean towards the Israeli issue, but I'm probably biased in that. But I think a lot of people they can't weigh which one is more. Is it the oil or is it the Israeli deal?
Right. For saying which, of course, I will be roundly attacked for being an anti-Semite to suggest that Israel might have geopolitical interest in the region. So I think they are co-equal. I don't think the war... There's no way we would have fought the war if it weren't for the fact that we could control the world by dominating the oil of the Middle East. And there's no way we would have been able to fight the war were it not for the participation of the Zionist element in American media and government supporting the 9/11 lie and the World War push.
Captain.
They call it global war, incidentally.
Okay. Before we go, we have other callers on the line, but very quickly, it seems like everybody around George Bush is leaving. Karl Rove is leaving. Tony Snow is leaving. A lot of people had already left, such as Paul Wolfowitz, Douglas Feith, etc., etc. So and George Bush has less than 2 years left. So what is going to be if we think about martial law? Martial law is not going to be, if it is, it will be forever, because whoever has that martial law will stay in power. And so what's going to happen if it's a Democrat who's the president, the next president of the United States? Do you think this program of martializing or instituting martial law in the United States will continue? Is it not George Bush? Is somebody else bigger than both parties that is in the works back here?
Oh, yeah. Look, at the deepest level, this is a globalist/Zionist world takeover plot. Every world war we understand is inherently a conspiracy. If you read the history of World War II, World War I, the Franco-Prussian War, man, you pick the war. And I'll show you that the history books will say that it was a grand conspiracy of interested parties. It always is. At present, we have a globalist Zionist alliance. If you want to put it in ethnic terms, you can call it an Anglo-Judeo alliance, aimed at destroying the rising power, or the inherent power through oil, of Middle Eastern Muslims and Arabs. The people who are running this globalist Zionist or Anglo-Judeo alliance are far above Bush. Bush is a middle manager. And the next presidential candidate will be a middle manager for these exact same interests. So that Hillary Clinton today came out and said, oh, yeah, well, there's progress in Iraq. So essentially, Hillary Clinton is echoing George Bush. You know, there was an old political figure in your part of the country, in the South, George Wallace, who used to say Republicans and Democrats, there ain't a dime's worth of difference. And that's true. I mean, the Democrats and the Democratic coalition pretends it wants to get out of Iraq, but it doesn't. It wants to stay in the war. It's a great issue. The anti-war sentiment's so high, it helps the Democrats. And furthermore, you know, it's as much behind the takeover of the Middle East and the false global war on terror, which is a code name for World War, of course. They're as interested in that as the Republicans. Both sides are dominated by ethnic and commercial interests far higher than the mere office of president. So if we look at it just as let's be Jeffersonian Democrats again, or let's be any of the revolutionary founders of America, the idea that you could have from 1988 to 2008, that's 20 years, a list of presidents that read Bush, Clinton, Bush, and now it's probably going to read Clinton again. My God, there's nothing American or Democratic about it. I mean, it's an obvious establishment of a tyrannical, anti-democratic rule.
I guess we're playing tic-tac-toe here. Captain Mill, we're going to go back to the phones with a gentleman who's been waiting for a long time.
Right.
Tom on 2. Go ahead, Tom.
Hey, how you doing?
Fine, thanks.
Hey, it looks like you have a problem with flies in the studio.
You see that, huh? There's one driving me crazy.
Yeah, I know, I saw that. But anyway, I'm reading a book right now that I really like. It's called The Gun and the Olive Branch by David Hurst, The Roots of Violence in the Middle East. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a great book. And it makes me just think that as long as the world's oil is located in the Middle East, and as long as we maintain a consistent alliance with Israel, we are not going to have peace. And and your guest is making a lot of interesting points, but that's all. I really just wanted to share that book with you and get your comments on that if you're familiar with it. And
what's the name of the book again?
It's called The Gun and the Olive Branch by David Hurst, and on the top of it says classic. Edward Said said classic, and this guy's a Britisher that's alienated a lot of people over in the Middle East, a lot of Arabs, I guess, as well as Jews that would review this book, because it's definitely, I would say, pro-Palestinian, or at least it reveals a lot of the hypocritical parts of Zionism as far as it being an example of democracy in the Middle East, when in actuality, I've never been there to experience it, but I guess you could compare it to like South Africa, apartheid South Africa, the way they treated the Arabs that stayed within Israel when they created the state in 48, and then people like Moshe Dayan, where they from the beginning, or even going back further to Herzl, from the very beginning they knew that they couldn't live in peace with the Arabs, that the Arabs would have to be displaced, and they didn't want the Arabs there because they wanted it strictly to be a Jewish state. And then in 67, when they occupied the West Bank and Gaza and Sinai and all that, they wanted to grab land, and I guess it was Menachem Begin who talked about Greater Israel, when he actually wanted it to stretch from the Nile all the way to the Euphrates. And all of this, and I'll wind it down, is based on this biblical thing about them being the chosen people. And I'm thinking, you know, I live in America, and I'm thinking, who says they're the chosen people? I mean, I'm not into all that religious stuff anyway. But it was written by men, and so the whole thing about intermingling politics and religion is dangerous. And then you've got these, you know, like Bush saying things about the Islamofascists and things like that. You know, this intermingling, and the whole Muslim world is evil, and on it goes. But anyway, The Gun and the Olive Branch, David Hurst. It is a great book.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With Dr. Tillawi and your last guest, I'm not familiar with the particular book, but I am familiar with all the central tenets that your educated caller just mentioned, and I didn't find any that I was in disagreement with. But the whole premise of the global war on terror is that we will be in perpetual conflict with the Muslim Middle East until, as we say, they quit attacking us and quit attacking our good friend Israel. All of that means, of course, until we quit creating pretexts for attacking them by saying they're attacking us. So the perpetual conflict between the United States with its allies, the United Kingdom, the other great imperial power, and Israel, the unmentionable power, against the Arabs and the Middle East generally, that's given. I believe that premise. As to the other thing, the mixing of religion and politics, I think a great amount of concerted effort has been made to make the most, in a lot of ways, the most decent and common Americans who are simply basic believers in their religion. I think they have been duped into believing that somehow they have to become pawns of a united...
Please enter your destination number now.
Did we lose him? We lost him. Okay. Yeah, so let's see if we can get him back. Enter your destination number. And we'll get him back. We have probably about 10 minutes left. But, I agree with the caller that as long as we are in alliance with Israel, and, normally when you do have an alliance with somebody, it would be like a beneficial deal for both. That's why people have alliances. Like, for instance, last week we had the Shanghai Organization, which is an organization that was that started between the Chinese and the Russians. They invited a few other countries to come and participate, and it's basically to be an opposing force, and I think it's like the beginning of another pact or another alliance, like the NATO that we have, and the old Warsaw Pact that we used to be when the Soviet Union used to be. So now they are basically these two forces are, but there is a benefit. That's why people get together. That's why people have alliances, because there's a benefit for both. So like the Chinese and the Russians, if they get together, there will be an opposing force to the United States. But this alliance between us and Israel, it doesn't make any sense, because we're not getting any benefits out of this. On the contrary, we are being destroyed because of this relationship. We are being used to basically do Israel's dirty job or dirty work for it. So it's not, we could not call it an alliance, and I don't know, and I think we will always be, not going to be peace as long as we are aligned politically, military. We are sending them $30 billion worth of aid with no strings attached. I believe we have the captain back. Captain, would you agree that as long as we have this, and I've been explaining to the viewers, I don't know why we call it an alliance, because an alliance should be beneficial to both parties, but this alliance with Israel is only, it's hurting us, but it's good for Israel. Do you agree that as long as we are aligned with Israel, that we're always going to be in trouble?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, my belief in that is so clear that I remember after the 9/11 attacks, and please understand, I believe, like the vast majority of Americans, that the official story of 19 Arab terrorists with box cutters was true. Immediately after the 9/11 attacks, I was talking to a good friend of mine, Chase Untermeyer. He's a former Bush cabinet official, undersecretary of the Navy for Bush 1, and he's now ambassador to Qatar. And Chase and I were talking, and he said, well, what do you think 911 teaches us? And I said, I think it teaches that we need to get the hell away from Israel. Because even according to the official 911 script, our alliance with Israel is the greatest thing that causes animus towards us, hatred towards us in the Middle East. All parties agree with that. I think that the alliance with Israel is a one-way thing that pulls us into, you remember Prime Minister Mahathir of Malaysia?
Right.
In 2003 making the statement that basically the United States was fighting as a proxy in the Middle East for Israel.
Right.
I believe that utterly, and I believe we are being used and abused. It's quite interesting that the two scholars who have done the most to develop that very politically incorrect thesis, Professors Walt and Mearsheimer of the University of Chicago and Harvard, have recently been blackballed. They've been driven out from giving a lecture on that very interesting topic on what they call the Israel lobby and its influence on U.S. foreign policy. Not only they've been driven out from giving a talk on that in their home city of Chicago. So first off, I believe that it's quite true that we're beholden to Israeli interests and we have become a pawn, a puppet, fighting a proxy war for Israel. And second, I think the greatest proof of that is that you can't mention that view on any mainstream media or even in any public forum of repute in the United States. The idea that you can't mention an idea in a democratic country usually means that the idea has validity.
Well, I mean, you know, it depends on what we call democratic country. By no means that we can consider ourselves a democratic country when we select our president out of two selectees, and because, you know, we got to a point where our political system is basically you have whoever this power to be basically letting the people choose out of two, and mostly they will push the one they want. I mean, we've seen this happen with Clinton and George Bush the father, where George Bush the father was coming out of a war with 98% approval, and a few months later was defeated. So they can control whichever selectee that is for the people to select. So let's not talk about democracy here. And of course, we did not send democracy to Iraq as we said we will. We only have about a minute left, Captain. Can you wrap it up?
Yes. To put it on some, I want to mention again that we are conducting a group of intellectuals under the title of Portland Nuclear Inquest. And if anyone Googles or Yahoo's that phrase, they will find the group, and if they wish to join and be aware of all of our work, they certainly can. I think the possibility of a false flag terror attack to be blamed on innocent Middle Easterners is very real. The prospect of dictatorship by the Bush regime or an ensuing regime like the Clinton regime is very real. And I think always, Dr. Tillawi, I like to finish by, as a soldier, as a lifelong officer, apologizing. I think what we have done in the Middle East is reprehensible. And, you know, I think the way it's presented to the United States citizens is reprehensible. I think that we have been part of what's called, we've been part of the Arab nightmare, and the United States media has presented it somehow as being the American dream. And that grieves me greatly, not only on behalf of the Arab victims of this war, but on behalf of my own country. And like any patriot, you know, I feel my own country's wronged and wounds acutely.
Okay.
I'm greatly ashamed of what we have been led to do.
Captain, we're going to have to leave it at that. As always, it has been a pleasure having you on the program.
It's been an honor, Dr. Tillawi.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you Thursday, 6:30. Not 7:30, 6:30. So be there. Good night.
Good night.
Hi, I'm Rose Hoffman Cormier, Health Information Center Coordinator of the Women's Foundation. The Women's Foundation is a local, private, nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting health and well-being to women and their families.